Hi guys, I hope you're all doing well and welcome back to another episode on the Just Music Podcast. I'm really excited about this week because I got to sit down with a good friend of mine, Corey Hricovsky. Corey and I actually went to Olivet College with each other, and we actually played alongside one another in Olivet College's jazz band. So in this episode we got to gear out and talk a lot of nerd talk about guitars. This is an episode that you're really going to look forward to, and Corey now joins in progress. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Just Music Podcast. I'm really looking forward to this episode because I have a friend, a musical colleague, somebody who I played in Olivet College's jazz band alongside one another. We had some raging guitar battles at some points. It was a lot of fun. Corey is a guitarist and a composer, and I would like to welcome onto the program Corey Hricovsky.
Thank you for having me.
How are you doing today, Corey?
It's incredibly rainy over here, and I cannot see the sun, but I'm trying to stay positive as much as possible with some sunny D.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty rainy over here as well. It's Michigan weather. You know, you have your batches of sunny days, your batches of cold days, and now we're in that awkward time of year where you have your batches of rainy days.
A little bit.
Yeah. Anyway, I would like to, before we kind of jump into all of our topics of discussion today, I'd like Corey to give a little bit of an origin story or some background information about himself, about, really how he got involved in playing music and playing guitar and, composing, and his first encounter of really what kind of got him interested in playing music specifically.
I remember this very vividly because I love telling this story. It was one Christmas. I was at a Christmas party. It was my grandfather's side, and they played a song on their radio. First time I ever heard this song. It was Surrender by Cheap Trick.
Oh.
Yeah, you know those blaring A chords that start it?
Yeah.
I specifically remember it because I heard my ears perk up at the time. It was kind of weird. I still get that from time to time. And I thought, what is this? I want to do this. What is this? And I really fell in love with that song. It was one of many love affairs I've had with music where I've just grasped onto a song. I don't want to let it go.
Right.
And following after, I got more of a taste in music. Around this time, the game Guitar Hero was coming out, so everybody was playing that, and I was being introduced to a lot of music at that point. Mm-hmm. Eventually, my dad took out a guitar from our basement that it's been his for a while. He gave it to me because I was so interested in it. I tried taking lessons, but I'm not very good with taking lessons. I have to teach myself. I'm very self-reliant and independent in that demand. And really, it was a lot of doing nothing. I remember because I didn't even know how to properly tune a guitar at the point, so I just tuned each note to what I thought sounded cool. I was like 12, so yeah, very young. Eventually, I got some structure in my life when I joined my high school's jazz band. Mm-hmm. I remember that because they really only took me in because I was really good at playing blues. Blues came very naturally to me. And they knew blues could transition to jazz pretty easily, or we could play 12-bar blues, so that's why they took me in. I didn't even know how to read sheet music at the time. I remember the day before my audition, I went to a friend of mine who was a saxophonist and pianist. Dude is really super talented. He won a whole bunch of competitions for it. And I asked him, can you teach me how to read music in one night? That was fun. Yeah, and eventually college came around. I joined the Olivet Jazz Band. That was a lot of fun. I started a band, a semi-professional one. We called the Freeloaders, with two of Justin's frat brothers, Zach Nash and Nate Van Stee. We had a bassist named Cameron Eldridge, and Rebecca McDaniel on violin. We played some country club gigs, and after that, I've been solo recording my own stuff. I'm right next to my recording setup right now. And I went to composing around junior year of college. It was something just as a hobby, but I got more into it, more serious. I took a private study with Justin and I's mutual professor, Dr. Flynn. He and I really chatted a lot. He got me into becoming a hardcore Beethoven geek, and now I'm here.
Yeah. Well, before we get into some of your projects you're composing, I just want to take note on this because it's so interesting, because from all of the other guitar players that I've talked to and just a lot of other musicians, it's just so interesting how guitar players kind of have this upbringing in the study of music, because we kind of like learn how to play. Like, for example, I'm kind of rooted in the blues as well. Before I started like, spreading out and starting to study, jazz or the classical stuff. So it's interesting because you start to learn how to do all these technical things, right? And like to say you can play blues music is cool, right? It's great, right? And but it's so weird because you learn how to do all these things, but you learn to read music lastly, which is so interesting because like for any other instrumental pursuit or even like vocal majors, maybe for that fact, I can't testify to that, but most instrumentalists, like if you're going to take up wanting to study the saxophone or take up wanting to study the cello, you're going to learn how to read the notes on the staff and then start gradually building up repertoire and building up where all the notes are on the fretboard or how you play certain notes on the keys on like a saxophone or a flute. But on the guitar, you learn how to play all these things before you actually go back. And it's evident from my playing as well, because I, started studying all this stuff and I learned how to do all these things, but I didn't read music. And then after I started playing for like 2 or 3 years, then is when I went back and started learning how to read music. It's just interesting to me that that's a lot of the ways that the guitar players are brought up, is that kind of thought process of learning the instrument, which is just really strange. It's not applicable to any other instruments that I'm aware of. But I thought that yeah, go ahead.
Go on.
I was just going to say, I thought that I would add that in there.
Yeah, I remember, especially my first year, I thought I want to get really good at guitar. So what's considered the most difficult style of guitar? Lead guitar, of course. So I thought, I'm going to be strictly a lead guitarist. I'm not going to bother learning chords. I'm not going to bother learning rhythms. I'm just going to be able to improvise, and it's going to be awesome. And first day of jazz band, I didn't know how to read chords properly or how to build a chord, and that was a nightmare for me.
Right.
Yeah.
It's interesting though, because I think that for a guitar player's point of view, their epitome of success is being able to be a great improviser, be able to rip out these awesome solos right on cue or whatever. But the fact of the matter is most improvised solos are not really truly improvised, because you go home and you practice how to improvise by learning how to play certain licks or how to play these, whatever bits and fragments of different solos. So when you say to improvise, it's funny because you're really not you are improvising on the spot, but you take all this time to practice your improvisation technique. So that way, when you're in a jam session or you're in a point where you're getting to take a solo, then you're, kind of have an idea of where you're going to go with it, which is kind of interesting to me. But it's also point to say that, a lot of the greats, as far as people who I consider to be great improvisers, like John Mayer, Jimi Hendrix, Eddie Van Halen, just a couple name drops there. But if you look at them, they're also arguably really, really fantastic rhythm guitar players.
Oh yeah. One of my biggest regrets is I didn't start learning rhythm guitar right away.
Right.
Because I think that's really more important as a guitarist.
Yeah.
Because when you have that solid foundation of rhythm, you really get to understand how the guitar's role in a band. Right. And then you can start playing around with why you do with the things you do. Right. It's more learning the language of guitar and,
Right. And the thing is with guitar too, is it's in the rhythm section. It's a rhythmic instrument. So it's not like it's a single line instrument, like a flute or a saxophone or a trumpet or trombone or whatever you may be playing. But it is definitely interesting in that regard, because I always tell people that the guitar is so melodic. And I think often, people just think that the guitar is just this accompanying, chordal based instrument that you sing over top of. And then it's so melodic and that you can do so many things of it. And I always say, like, for me, like doing like the classical and the solo stuff like that, it's like playing the guitar as if it was a piano, where you have your bass, your melody, and your accompaniment.
Yeah. I remember the first time I ever heard a Robert Johnson record. Mm-hmm. It was, no, it wasn't Sweet Home Chicago. It was Love in Vain. And that record, he's playing with, like, using his bass, like, in his thumb. He's making, like, this bassier sound just using, like, the creases in his thumb.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, like, he's playing a piano, but it's a guitar.
Right.
And it really, like, blew my mind and opened me up to, like, all these different ideas of thinking of a guitar, that when I say I play guitar now, I don't really think I play just guitar in the sense I think of it as a guitar, because I think of it as it's a piano, it's a trumpet, and it's like a drum set as well, because if you know what you're doing with those strings, you can think of it as like a kick bass, a snare, and a hi-hat.
Right.
And that's where you can start playing more rhythmically and experimenting with like what parts of the chords you're going to highlight with rhythms and stuff like that.
Right. You know, it's interesting. Professional musician Dave Grohl, drummer of Nirvana and lead singer of Foo Fighters, started that project. He also looks at the guitar that way because he started out as a drummer, and then when he transitioned to started playing guitar, you can look up these interviews where he talks about, he's like, I don't think of the guitar as a guitar, I think of it as a drum kit. And he puts all each parts of the strings or whatever, he'll, you know, delegate to a specific instrument, a part of the drum kit. And then he like, that's how he describes his instrumentation when he writes his music on the guitar, which I think is very interesting.
I like to think of my guitar as my own little combo that I have full control over. So I'll definitely think of like, I'll section off different parts of my guitar to different parts of what I want in the song.
Mm-hmm.
So like, of course, my lower notes are my bass.
Right.
My higher notes, especially during like the little bottleneck range,
mm-hmm.
it's totally my trumpet or my saxophone or whatever I want to play the lead.
Mm-hmm.
And then everything else is just, that's the rhythm. That's where everything else is going to be, the accompaniment.
Yeah. I similarly think in that regard. So when I'm doing like these solo pieces, or when I'm arranging for it, I think of it like that. I'm like, okay, well, I have my bass part, and then I have my middle voice. So I almost think of it as like arranging for like an orchestra. I think the guitar has 6 strings on a standard 6-string guitar. And I think about, okay, well, here's the lower notes. So this would be like my cello, my principal bass, blah, blah, blah. And then I have my inner voices, which would be like, you know, my violas and violins and such of that nature. And then I have my higher voices, my flutes and piccolos and, you know, things like that. So I do think of that in the same regards. I think of the strings as like orchestrating for the guitar. It's interesting in that regard.
I remember I was in a show choir for a time in high school, and we had this piece, and every time I heard it, it sounded like it needed a cello, like playing it out, like the last few notes. So I took a bow from one of the stringed instruments we had, and whenever we played it, I'd use the bow on my lower notes to get that cello sound that would like lead out the piece.
Right. That's awesome. Yeah. It is interesting because like a lot of the guitar players that I have come in contact with are more or less, and I don't say this as a demeaning thing or a devaluing thing, they're just more in the amateur, the hobbyist aspect. And then when I started to surround myself with more people that were more, more to that intermediate, you know, I would say more to the professional aspect of wanting to do music as like a career and stuff. And then like when we kind of like, you know, just have banter back and forth about like guitar and stuff, and it's just like, God, there's other guitar players out there that do know their theory or do know how to actually read music. And then it's just so much more, it's just interesting because like I said, guitar is like such an instrument where a lot of people don't learn how to read music, and it's such a rarity. So when you come across another guitar player that has chops or knows theory or knows how to read music, it's like a breath of fresh air, because you're like, I'm not the only one that exists.
I remember in high school we had a guy try out for jazz band a lot. He couldn't read sheet music. He couldn't do anything really. So what he would do when we got these jazz charts is he knew what improvisation lines look like. And in jazz, that's like all the guitar part. You have the improvised lines and the chords, and you're just supposed to do something with it.
Right.
But he took it as, oh, I get an improvisation solo throughout the whole piece.
You know, that's funny because it's also like guitar players, and I've had conversations about this on other people with the podcast. Guitar players are so bad in the sense of the guitar community, and just guitar players in general are just so hard to work with, because
you have no idea.
they want to crank their amps up really, really loud. They want to be the center of attention, and it's like guitar players are just arrogant, and it's really hard. And I'm not saying all guitar players, but just in my experiences, it's just the greater majority of them are just really, really hard to kind of deal with, because they have overcompensation when they think they're really, really great hot stuff, but they're really not as good as they think they are. Or, you know, they're just really arrogant in the regard that they want to steal the show and they want to be the center of attention, and they don't really know what their role may be in a band.
I remember I once tried out for a band. I was given like these details that this band was looking for another guitarist. So I gave them a call, called them up, and I just thought, whatever. I don't even know what genre this band plays. I was just going to do it to expand my horizons, meet some people. Yeah. And they started asking me what kind of music I listened to. And I don't really remember what I was listening to at the time. But then they said, so you don't listen to Pantera, you don't listen to, started naming off metal band after metal band after metal band. And they said, I'm sorry, but you're not brutal enough for us. And that was that.
Yeah, they're like, those are the types of cats that are, playing in like, I don't know, like C# standard or something like that, It's hard, I just think, again, it just really goes back to that idea that the guitar community is just, they're just so, I don't know. I would argue that, guitar players are, if out of all the musicians that they think that they're the best, they're probably the lesser of musicians in terms of having, a good foundation in how to do music theory and how to read music, just because it's not something that you don't necessarily have to have. I mean, there's arguably tons of great guitarists out there that probably don't know a lick of theory or a lick of music. And it's like one of those instruments where you can make a career on that without really knowing what you're doing.
Yeah, it's easy to have happy accidents with a guitar over other instruments.
Yeah, well, it's like with the guitar, you're only one fret away from the right note, right? Guitar is just is a very visual instrument too, and like I try to explain this to other people and other instruments, and they don't really understand it. But like guitar, we have these shapes, or we have these box shapes.
The patterns.
Yeah, there's these pattern shapes where you just remember the finger pattern. And then that's, 85%, if not more, of all the knowledge you really need. You say, oh, okay, I just figure out where the root is. I plug in that pattern and bam, there I go. There's my solo, or, there's whatever. And it's the same thing with chords, where if you were like, again, like a saxophonist or something, you have to know exactly what the notes are in the scale and what you're playing, and be more, kind of coherent of what's going on with the key and the piece that you're playing, because you don't have, I suppose you have fingerings and shapes that you may consider, but like, you don't have this visual reference as much as the guitar does.
Mm-hmm. For me, it's like, I feel like there's such a weird learning curve to guitar, because it's super easy to get into, but until you make that actual step into actual musicianship in theory,
right,
you're going to be stuck there for good. Like no advancement.
I think guitar, as I've heard it be said before by many people, guitar is probably one of the easiest instruments to start learning on, but it's one of the hardest instruments to master.
Oh, easily. Yeah.
And, I had to do, some piano classes in my undergrad at Olivet, and I always remember when I would sit down with the piano instructor there. Her name was Dr. Ramona Kime. And I would always talk to her about these shapes, and I was like, oh, okay, that's like when I would play like a C major chord, I'd be like, oh, that's a C chord shape. And she's like, why do you keep saying shape? And I'm like, I just think of it as shapes because that's the way that the guitar is. Like, you think about like the cage system, which is the chord shapes of C, A, G, E, and D, and how you can play any single chord in those cage shaped patterns. So we are taught to learn these like shapes on the guitar, but it's not that way on other instruments, which is just so interesting. Because like if you say, oh yeah, your cage system, right? If you say that to a piano player, they're going to say, what is the cage system? And they're like, what is that? I've never heard of that. It's just like it's just an only thing that's applicable to guitar. And I suppose ukulele kind of has a cage system too, but it's a little bit different for lettering, because they also have these movable chord shapes, but I wouldn't really call it the cage system. The letters are a little bit different. I have yet to explore the horizons of the system beyond ukulele, but it's the same kind of application where there's these base shapes that you can move all along the fretboard in a new position, and it's a new chord.
I feel very bad for ukulele players, or ukulelist, if that's the proper term, because I feel like they are also very stuck in that. Like, you see the rare guitarist outside of, like, the cage system, learning their theory and whatnot, but I've never seen anybody take ukulele that seriously to go past that and, like, use it outside of just accompaniment.
Yeah, there's a couple of guys out there that are pretty good at it who will do like solo ukulele arrangements. There's a guy on YouTube. I don't know what his name is right now, but he's really big on YouTube. He's got a huge following because he does a bunch of like solo arrangements on the ukulele, and that's mean, you can find that on guitar. That's more common on guitar, but on ukulele, you know, with 4 strings, that's difficult. And the thing is with the ukulele is because you're low, the way that it's tuned, it's tuned in fourths and then on a third, like it is on the guitar. You have G, C, E, and A. But your high G string, what would be considered your lowest string is like a higher in pitch. So really you only have like 3 melody strings, which is really interesting. So like your voicings and how you voice the chords are just a lot more challenging based on like guitar where you have like 6 strings or 6 possibilities to do it on.
I get that.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a good transition point. I love just kind of like picking people's brains about guitar, and it's just cool to talk about other guitar players because a lot of people just don't really understand it as much as other people.
You have to be in the know.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So Corey, I wanted to kind of transition into some of your work as far as I know. You said now that you're doing some more like solo related work and you're doing some composing. In fact, I listened to some of your compositions when you sent me your SoundCloud. And some of your arranging. So I'd like you to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So right now with the coronavirus going on, I'm an essential worker. I work at a gas station. I'm the night manager, not the gas station, a grocery store. I'm the night manager there. And I don't have as much time as I used to work on pieces. Mm-hmm. So right now I'm working a lot on arrangements because the piece is already done. I just got to do something with it. The first big one I did was, I rearranged John Coltrane's Giant Steps, which, if anybody knows Giant Steps, that's a nightmare.
Links in the description.
Thank you. I haven't published the Giant Steps one yet. The idea of it was it's incredibly hard to solo on. I wanted to try making it easier for people. Like, I called it moderate steps. So you go from moderate steps to giant steps. It was more about slowing down the pace and then using common tones to lead the chords more and for the key changes. Then I went on to work on a piece. I have a love of Chopin's Nocturne Opus 9, the second movement.
Oh yeah,
one of my favorite pieces. I guess that's really not a big opinion, like big deep cut opinion, but I still love that piece. And I always thought it sounded like a jazz piece at heart, so I took the time and rearranged it into a jazz piece, which was super weird, and I loved it because that whole piece is an A and B back and back again. It just gets more variations and ideas added onto it. It's like Chopin's improvising on those themes throughout the piece, and they just grow and grow and grow. So for that, I took the melody, had to boil it down to what I thought was the core assets, redo the harmony and arrangement, and just kind of turn it into a lead sheet almost. And then I ended up recording it, did a jazz version of it. I did a drum machine, did piano on it, added some bass, did my guitar for it. And for the solos, I decided it was only fitting to take those main themes that we had for the melody and just improvise on those themes only for the solo improvisation section. And that worked amazingly, fit like a glove. Besides that, I have a lot of solo pieces. Today, I actually just published a whole bunch of my Bandcamp because I knew we'd be talking about it, and I want people to at least be able to find it.
Link.
My first big piece was called Pond Water. It's a 3-part. My girlfriend likes to call it a symphony. I don't call it that because it's not long enough. It started off as this little exercise Dr. Flynn wanted me to do, where he wanted me to just write 32 measures of something. So I did a quick binary, and that became the second movement of the piece. Then he's like, okay, this is really good. I want you to explore your harmonic ideas, because you have a lot of different ideas for harmony than most people. So I did like this chorale, this weird chorale for the very first movement. And I call it like a Debussy chorale. I feel like it's what happens if Bach and Debussy like hung out together.
Boy, what would that be like?
Well, they wouldn't be able to speak to each other because they both were French and German.
German, right? There's a language barrier there.
Yeah. Debussy would have been like, what's going on here?
Nye. Yeah, that's cool, man. Yeah, definitely we'll make sure to put those links down in the description to check that out. It is interesting, though, because I know that there's a lot of composers. I think Coltrane, I quoted this on another podcast, and I didn't actually follow up on the research, but I'm pretty sure Coltrane did this where he would take some Bach works and then he would like rearrange them for harmony. And he basically make like a jazz trio out of some Bach music. I'm pretty sure, I don't think it was Davis. I'm pretty sure it was Coltrane.
I feel like that's a Coltrane move.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like him. Definitely not like a Charlie Parker thing, I don't think.
No.
But yeah, so there's like a bunch of like, you can just type in like Bach Jazz and you can find these recordings. And this is a fairly common practice today still, where people will arrange like Minuet in G, for example, is a really common Bach piece, and like somebody would arrange it for jazz and like rearrange like all the harmonies, so it's, instead of it being just like a 1-4-5, it's, you know, now like a 2 minor 2-5-1 thrown in there, you know, dominant sevens and major sevens, diminished, whatever. But yeah, it's cool. I really like that. I think when you rearrange a piece and rearrange the harmony and make it more harmonically active, it kind of adds this new flair and like a new kind of tonal palette to a piece like that, where it may be, I don't want to use the term basic because basic implies that it's not, but simple can be beautiful, but basic as far as like its complexity and the harmonic analysis. Yeah.
I always say that there's no harm in putting more color into something, as long as the color doesn't distract from what the tonality of the piece is supposed to be.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is I know we kind of talked about this a little bit, but this is a good kind of transition point as well. So I know that because of you know, technology and stuff in the virus, I mean, this is cool that we're you know, having a little bit more time as far as like, you know, being able to use technology to our advantage as musicians. And I know for me, you know, this podcast came out of, you know, starting something new because of having more time in the day, as far as, you know, I'm not obviously working, unfortunately, but being able to have some more time. So I would like you to talk a little bit about that, as far as like your implementation, excuse me, of like technology and like your processes as far as like composing and arranging and things of that nature.
When I knew I wanted to get more serious about composing, I wanted to get a stronger computer. I had a laptop that was just like this basic one that was meant for college students at the time.
Yeah.
So I went back on Amazon. I found a really old one. This thing doesn't even have like a webcam or anything like that. It was meant for like business people doing serious business. And I was looking at the specs. I'm like, this can run music perfectly. So I bought it, and it's a very powerful computer. I put all my works on it. I need to get like a new hard drive for it because it's getting full. But yeah, it was the kind of thing where I could open up several programs and run everything smoothly, have them all play at once. And it's kind of like my little music center right now. I call it my orchestra in a box.
I'm definitely aware of like, you know, making sure that you have like the proper equipment for this type of stuff. Cause like I have a computer that's, you know, fairly old now. I got it when I graduated high school, and that was 5 years ago. So my computer's really old, and when I'm doing all the recording and the videos that I do, it takes a really long time to process it. So like this video here, we'll record on recording it on a Wednesday, but for how long it'll take, it probably won't go up until like, unfortunately, like next week. Maybe if I'm lucky, if it gets through quick enough, I'll get it by the end of the week. But yeah, it just takes a long time. But I definitely know I need to invest in some equipment that's better suited for video production and audio production, because I think the processor on this computer is really just geared towards running like Microsoft Word for writing papers, and, you know, maybe using it for a little internet.
I'm pretty blessed because I don't do video production on my computer, so I'm pretty blessed in that regards, that it's just powerful enough for audio production. I also had to take some time and get my equipment ready for audio production, especially when I'm recording live instruments instead of just those MIDIs. If I can't, I can show you my recording setup. It's like right next to me.
Yeah, sure. Let's see it. Let's check it out. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Let me switch the camera. So this is my recording room. I have fabric posters all over the walls so they can absorb sound. But over here we have my red amp. I have this green cord. I color code all my cords. I always buy them different colors so I know which one goes where. So this is my green one. It goes into my guitar pedal. I've got a red cord for my headphones when they go plug into the audio box over here. Okay. I record everything once at a time so I can at least make sure I'm layering everything properly. I have a black cord that goes right to my microphone. Microphone stands right over here. in this bag, I keep my pedal just for any occasion. I always make sure I have a blue cord that goes right into it. I use this little RP255 Digitech pedal.
Mm-hmm.
I've had this my whole life. Well, not my whole life, but my whole career as a guitarist for like 10 years now, and it's always worked. I love it. So yeah, usually I'll just run the pedal down here through the amp. Amp will pick it up through this microphone right here. I use a hair tie to make sure the pop filter doesn't come off. Otherwise, some of the bass will start wrecking the sound. And it comes in through this audio box, which will go through my laptop.
Good deal.
And I have occasional other stuff in here in this box. Other microphones. Right here is what I use to plug in for a MIDI sound. That way I at least have something analog to play through, and then I can just start researching what tones I want for piano parts.
Right.
When I want a more authentic piano sound with more octaves, I have this digital keyboard I keep back here.
Good deal. I definitely appreciate the color coding.
Yeah, it's also a good way of saying you can't steal my stuff, because who else carries a green cord like that?
On all of my chords, I know it looks a bit tacky, but I will put either like blue. I usually don't. Sometimes if I don't have it, but I'll use duct tape, and I'll always write my initials on it, or I'll use blue painter's tape.
That.
And on every single guitar case I have, I'll have my name and my phone number, and I always write on it, "Do the right thing."
I remember that.
And for me, I put that on there because if somebody comes across that and they, come up to it and they open and they say, well, God, there's this, I could make a quick buck on selling this guitar or whatever. This guitar has, got some value in it, some cash value. I feel like if I put on there, "Do the right thing," or I put in a word of encouragement to give it back to the right owner, maybe that'll touch someone and say, God, there's somebody that really is missing this instrument, or, because, for us, I mean, I'm sure it is probably applicable to other musicians too, but I really develop a relationship with each of the guitars that I have.
Oh yeah. I'm surrounded by my guitars right now, and I've named every single one of them.
Oh, I have a name for every single guitar too. And for me, it's like, it's such a intimate experience. And I don't mean intimate in like a weird way, but intimate in terms of like when you have your guitar with you, it's just like, it's an extension of you,
Yeah. To me, it always feels like you're cradling it. And
yeah. It's your baby.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you got to protect your baby. You don't want anybody to harm it. You don't want anybody, and that's why I've always been like super careful about people playing my guitars too. It's like it's nothing. It's nothing against anybody, and it's not that I don't trust people. It's just I have this weird thing where I just don't like people. I know how much the value of these instruments are and how much I worked hard to get them. And like specifically my Blue Jazz Master 2017 Fender American Professional Series. I remember Winter NAMM, I think it was, of 16, that they were talking about this guitar. Or wait, no, it was summer. No, it had to have been winter because it was coming out for the summertime, I think. Or maybe it was summer 17. I'm not sure. 2016 or 2017, I remember watching NAMM, and I remember watching Fender's releases, and they were releasing this brand new signature line of American Professional Series Jazz Masters, which was the first time in all of Fender history where they released an American Professional Series for the Jazz Masters and the Jaguars. And I was like, oh my God, that guitar is absolutely beautiful. And see, I've had Telecasters and I had Strats, and I liked the Telecaster when I had it, but I got rid of both of them to actually put money towards that guitar that I have now. And I just found that I really kind of gravitated towards that body shape and the feel a little bit better. And I'm not saying that I won't maybe ever own one of those guitars again, but that's the guitar that I just love. And like I've played other electric guitars, and that's just the guitar that suits me. And I just really like the style. But anyway, I remember when I first saw that being released, and then I kept going in the music store, and I said, have you guys gotten in your American Professional Series yet? And we're like, no, we're waiting on a shipment. And I would go in like every couple weeks. And then finally, there it lay on the wall. And I went in there and I grabbed that thing down and I just looked at it before I even plugged it in, before I even played it. And I just had it in my hands and I was looking at it like this, doing like the 360, just like living it up and down. Yeah, the inspection. I was like, I'm going to probably end up buying this guitar. And I went and I plugged it in and I played it. And I was just like, damn, this guitar, man, it just, I don't know, it was just something about it that I really, really liked it. And I just like the feel of it. And I've had that guitar ever since. And I'll never get rid of that guitar. That guitar's got like sentimental value to me now for whatever reason. Cause I feel like that was like the first guitar that I like really, really got really excited about. And that's the most expensive guitar I own as well. So that's also why I want to get rid of it. But I remember having to like take out a payment plan or an installment loan to like buy it, because it was like really, really expensive. But it worked out all right. Still got it today.
I always love hearing people's stories about how they get their signature guitar, the one that it's their guitar, the one that they won't let go of.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I've always been a Les Paul guy, mainly because I knew Les Paul as a jazz musician, and he made this guitar for jazz, but I've seen blues players use it, rock musicians use it. It's always been like the jack of all trades to me in the guitar world. You can use it for anything, and that's something I've always found lovable about it, is it can be used for anything. It's got that universal sound. So I've always gravitated towards Les Pauls myself. I have a special one in my room right now. I'm looking right at it. It's it was a 2013, I think. Mm-hmm. Les Paul Pro, like one of those special ones that Epiphone makes. That's like, it's almost a Gibson.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love Epiphone Les Pauls. They were the first ones, by the way. So I looked at it. It was used. A week before, I met this guy. He was this really cool Native American dude working out of a guitar center in Lansing. His name was Bon. And he talked to me, and he was just telling me about his passion for used guitars, because you never know what you're going to find at a used guitar store.
For sure.
And yeah, ever since then, I took his words to heart. And I really decided I'm going to start looking at used guitars more, because you never know when you're going to find something custom. You never know when you're going to find something that they just don't know what they have.
Right.
I got lucky. They didn't know what they had. The guitar was fairly newer, I think 2009 at the latest. But whoever had it before was building it to be like a 1969 Les Paul.
Mm.
Yeah. So they rearranged the pickups to be more like that. A lot of big altercations. I got it for a steal because they didn't know what they had. And I took it back there to get some repairs because it was fairly broken at the time. The nut was breaking. The little flipper switch was falling apart. Had to get a new one of those. I upgraded the nut to ivory, so now it just resonates perfectly. I never looked back. And then when I was there, the same guy who sold it to me really took a closer look, and he's like, "Did you do this pickup work to it?" I'm like, "No, it was like that when I bought it." And he's like, "So we've been holding on to this almost 1969 Les Paul remake, and we didn't know what we had." And he got so upset with the salesman for not appraising it properly, because I got it for a steal.
Man, that's I've heard stories like that before. You know, a lot of people maybe like inexperienced at like appraising, and they don't do their research on things, and people get guitars that have been priced super, super low, like almost steal worthy. And like in this example that you're talking about, where, you know, they get the guitar for like a steal, and really it should have been priced, you know, several $1,000s ahead of what they paid it for.
Oh yeah. I honor my baby. I call it Bon after the guy who told me to start looking at used guitars more often.
Well, Bon, if you're watching,
yeah,
it's not for sale.
No, it's my baby.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. It is. I love hearing these types of stories as well, like hearing how people like come across their guitars. And I don't know, maybe it's I think again, it's like really one of those guitar player things. I don't know, maybe other musicians have a really good like connection with their instruments, but I think for guitar players, there's something that they get really, really excited about.
I've known people who will have inferior guitars, but they will never upgrade it because the guitar has so much sentimental value to them. They're like, only you can get this kind of sound from this guitar. Nothing else ever sounds like it.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, I've seen that where people have like, you know, the $150 square bullet guitars, and that was like their first guitar that they've ever owned, so they'll like never get rid of it, which I mean, everyone's got to start somewhere, but yeah, I don't know, maybe upgrade the pickups at least. I don't know.
I need to upgrade the pickups on my old, like my first guitar, because they stopped working, so you can't plug it in anymore.
And it needs to be rewired or something.
Oh, I think so. It's an old guitar.
Yeah, I need to take my jazz mastering to get some work. I've like really rusted out the bridge to it from my hand, and it's like all this like chrome silver or whatever, and it's just like all tarnished and rusted out, and like the nails and the screws and the pickups are all rusty, and it's just because as a guitar I play, and I play that guitar like almost every day, and
Yeah.
that just that just happens, just like with anything. It's just exactly where your wrist kind of meets the bridge too, where your hands get sweaty or whatever, and they just start to sweat and they just kind of rust all that off.
Gosh.
That's all right, Corey. So did you have anything as far as like words of advice or wisdom to possibly anybody that's hearing this? It's obviously because a lot of people have so much free time now. Is there anything that you would want to leave as far as like lasting words to those people who are maybe like interested in wanting to start picking up the guitar, or maybe they have more time to actually pursue a hobby in guitar, and maybe they're kind of apprehensive about doing it, and they just need that little burst of encouragement or that little push?
I'll say when I started off, I was the most talentless person I knew.
We all are.
Yeah. I was friends with this very musical family, and these guys were really cool with me. They helped me learn. They were the same people that taught me how to read sheet music.
Mm-hmm.
And it amazes me how I've actually caught up with them, and we can talk like one-on-one now, when I used to think they were always my superiors. And especially when I started like jazz band,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people there actually knew what they were doing. I didn't know. And by my senior year, I was leading the class, star performer, doing all the improvisations. I was working on oral skills with the teacher outside the class. So
Mm-hmm.
you get what you put in.
Yeah.
And you can never go in expecting to be a talent overnight. My little brother started learning trumpet,
Mm-hmm.
and he hates it because he can't make the sound, and he gave up on it. And I'm not going to like harsh his vibe because he's only 10, but I really recommend to anybody that if you're passionate about it, stick with it, because you never know what you're going to be like in 10 years.
Right. Well, that's really, really admirable advice. I also think just to kind of piggyback off on that and add to it, I think for guitar or any instrument or anything that you may be doing, it doesn't even have to be guitar, just applying this type of this to your life and anything you're trying to become better at, is I think practicing every single day for a small amount of time is better than practicing once a week for a large amount of time. So I'll give you an example. If you can spend half an hour, 30 minutes every single day of the week, 7 days a week, and if you can dedicate 30 minutes every single day to consistently practice, you will see so much more results versus if you practice 5 hours one day a week.
I describe it as like being like martial arts. You got to practice those muscles. You got to get the muscles right. You have to be able to perform with confidence.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I mean, it's insane. When I tell people how much I play and I say play, but it's practicing and playing. But when I say how much I have the guitar in my hands a day, and I mean, granted, I'm also, not right now so much, but before this whole virus thing, I was teaching a lot and I was playing a lot. So it would be really easy for me to have the guitar in my hands for like 8 hours a day. Easy. Between practice and teaching. And now, because I'm not doing that as much, and now I'm only practicing, I would say it's probably between the 10 and 12. I mean,
I'm jealous of that.
I get up probably around 8 o'clock in the morning, eat breakfast or whatever, and I immediately go start practicing. And then I won't stop playing until, like 9:30 at night, 10 o'clock at night. And up to that point too, I mean, obviously there's breaks and there's times where I go, eat dinner or lunch or whatever. So it's not consistent that amount of time that I'm not just sitting there and playing for 10 hours in one stretch, but it's like small little intervals, 3 hour block here, 3 hour block here, 4 hour block here, whatever. And it's just like, I am so compelled to do it that it's almost like a drug. I am so addicted to playing guitar, I can't help myself. And
I get that.
It's gotten to the point, well, you're probably aware of this, but when I was in college, when we were still in school, Oh, by the way, I should note that Corey and I both graduated together. We were the same class, 2019 OC, baby.
2019!
But anyway, I got to the point where I remember when I was in class and before I was doing music full time and I was doing, I was still working like a job and stuff. I remember I would get so frustrated when I had to stop playing because I had to either go to class or I had some other obligation that wasn't music related. And I would become so angry, and not angry in the sense where I was like aggressive or like assertive towards people where I was like, oh, I want to punch you or whatever. But it was just anger in the sense that I was like, I just want to play guitar. I don't want to go to math class. I don't want to go to writing class. I just want to practice guitar. That's all I want to do. And
you want to know the best music theory class I ever had?
What would that be?
That was my pre-calculus class in high school because I would just leave a one notebook for writing down whatever the teacher was writing on the board. And the other notebook I would have just for writing music theory equations and memorizing chords and circle of fifths, orders.
Yeah, man. I remember in high school, I was like, man, I'm so tired of this. I can't wait to go home so I can play guitar. And that for me, when I got so obsessed to the point where it was like I literally had to do it every single day, that's how I knew this is what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, because I realized I was like, I kind of sat down with myself and I had this realization where I was like, okay, Justin, you have to figure out what you want to do for the rest of your life. You're coming up on your senior year of high school. You're going to graduate soon. You're going to have to go to school. You're going to have to figure out what you want to do. And my thing was, I figured out to myself, what was the one thing I couldn't do a day without doing? Mm-hmm. And that for me was guitar. And that's how I knew. I was like, this is what I want to dedicate my life to, and this is what I want to do. And by no means do I consider myself a professional. I mean, I still have tons to learn. And I'm so excited to continue to learn. But this is the thing that just gets me so excited about it, because my passion is just so there that the drive is just, I always want to learn. There's always more to learn. I just want to keep learning. And then that's like why I get lost. And I'll look at the clock and I say, holy crap, I've already been playing guitar for 5 hours already. Like where did the time go?
For me, it's the kind of thing where even though I'm busy being essential and whatnot and trying to help people, I will always keep some paper with me, and I'll do music theory exercises while at work.
Good, yeah.
Yeah. One thing I've been definitely trying to learn is how to compose without hearing like having an instrument with me. Mm-hmm. So I'll write something at work, and then I'll come back home and play it out and make sure it was like what I wanted versus that. Right. Yeah. I definitely get that. I'm a little more defiant, and then if I'm doing something outside of music, I'll still try to do music stuff on the side.
Right. Yeah. That's good. Yeah, I would get to the point where it's like, if I had to drive in the car or something, I would throw on like ear training exercises. Okay, sing a major third, where's a perfect fourth? And I would, just so that I could, kind of still be a practice music, even though I didn't have my instrument in hand. I
mean, I do the same exact thing. I'll like sing along with the radio and try to identify the intervals that I'm singing.
Yeah. That's the other thing too. Big takeaway for people who are practicing that, maybe they can't have their instrument right in their hands is, music is all around us. You can practice it even though you don't have the instrument in your hand, You
got one right here.
Right. All right, Corey, I would like to thank you for being on the Just Music podcast. Again, everybody, this is Corey Hricovsky, a composer, a guitarist. And we'll have all of his links in the description so that you guys can check him out. But thank you again, Corey. I really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, take care, bud.
You too, man.
All right, guys, that was the podcast episode. I hope you really liked it. Make sure you check all the links down in the description to check out some of Corey's original work. And I'll see you in the next upcoming episode on the Just Music podcast. Take care.